Okay, so get this. Today, we're diving into like straight up Gothic cinema.
Ooh, sounds spooky.
Yeah, but like not just the, jump scares and stuff. We're talking about how like the whole vibe of the 1930s, with fascism on the rise and everything, totally messed with these films.
Right, right. Like these anxieties just seeped right into the celluloid.
Totally. And like we've got this excerpt here talking about how it went down, specifically with films that were like already Gothic AF to begin with, like Nosferatu and Frankenstein.
Classic horror flicks. Everyone knows those.
Right. So get ready to like totally rethink these movies. We're going to uncover how they took on like a whole new layer of meaning in this crazy era. It's going to be intense.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so um, the source really emphasizes how the anxieties of the 1930s, like fear of invasion, societal decay, out of control ambition, and like people feeling totally powerless.
Yeah, all that totally messed up stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's saying that like these fears literally found a way to express themselves through these movies. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. The 1930s was like a total pressure cooker. Totalitarian regimes were popping up left and right. The economy was in the toilet, and everyone was scared. Like, seriously scared of another world war. It makes sense that those anxieties would find an outlet.
Right. Like people needed to process all this crazy stuff somehow.
And let's be real, Gothic cinema was like the perfect escape, but not just escape, right? It was like a way to confront those fears head on.
That's interesting. It makes me think about Nosferatu in a whole new way. Like that film is already terrifying on its own, but now like thinking about it as this expression of the fear of the other,
Whoa, yeah,
it's like next level scary.
totally. Nosferatu with his like creepy pointy ears and those claw-like
And
hands.
don't forget like the rodent face.
Right, he's like the embodiment of invasion, like this
Right.
monstrous thing that infiltrates and corrupts society from within.
Yeah, he's like a disease spreading through the shadows. The way he moves, so slowly, so deliberately, it's just pure visual paranoia.
And let's not forget the historical context, right? Borders were closing, nationalism was on the rise, and there was all this suspicion towards foreigners.
It's like he symbolizes that fear, the fear of the outsider.
Precisely, the other who's a threat to everything you know.
Okay, so we've got Nosferatu tapping into that fear of the other. But what about Frankenstein? What anxieties do you think that film, like, reflects?
Frankenstein's different, but just as intense. It's all about unchecked ambition and the abuse of power. You've got Dr. Frankenstein, this brilliant scientist who's so obsessed with conquering death that he creates, well, a monster he can't control.
It's so messed up, right? Like, you kind of feel for the monster,
But the real monster is like the ambition itself.
right. And the source made me think about how this must have resonated with audiences back then. They were watching these fascist regimes rise, seeing individual rights being crushed.
Totally. It's like Frankenstein is warning us, you know?
Yeah.
Even with good intentions, the pursuit of power can have like truly horrific
It's
consequences.
heavy stuff.
It is. And what's wild is how relevant it still feels, you know? Nearly a century later.
It's like these movies were saying, hey, this monster might seem fantastical, but it could be a metaphor for what's happening in the real world right now.
Exactly. And that's the power of the Gothic genre, right? It's not just about scaring you, it's about using atmosphere, symbolism, and these monstrous figures to like really explore the dark side of human nature.
And don't forget the music.
Oh yeah, the music totally adds to that feeling of unease.
Totally. Like something's just off. Oh, and speaking of off, our source mentions this whole concept of the uncanny. Can you break that down for us? What does that even mean?
So the uncanny is this feeling of like unsettling familiarity. Something's recognizable, but also super strange at the same time. It's that feeling you get when you see a familiar face in a crowd, but you just can't place it.
Or like when you see a really lifelike doll and it just freaks you out.
Exactly. And in terms of fascism, the uncanny reflects how the lines get blurred between like what's familiar and what's alien, what's safe and what's dangerous.
Ooh, that's creepy. Like imagine your neighbor who you've known forever suddenly starts like spouting these radical ideologies.
Whoa, yeah. It's like they're still your neighbor, but there's this unsettling shift, this unfamiliar thing lurking beneath the surface.
And that's what was happening in the 1930s, right? Propaganda, manipulation of truth, charismatic leaders swaying entire societies with promises of a glorious past.
Which was like totally fictionalized most of the time. It was a time when reality itself felt distorted, uncanny.
And Gothic cinema, with its like distorted realities and monsters was the perfect way to reflect that feeling.
Absolutely. And while these films were entertaining, they were also like a powerful commentary on the dehumanizing effects of these totalitarian regimes.
It's like they were warning people about the dangers of giving up individual freedom for some kind of collective good.
Exactly. And that's why they still resonate with us today. It's crazy to think that these films made nearly a century ago can still speak to our modern anxieties.
It's pretty mind-blowing. I mean, think about all the films and TV shows we watch today that use those same elements, those horror and sci-fi tropes.
It makes you wonder, what are they trying to tell us about our own time? What fears are they tapping into?
Whoa, that's a great question to leave our listeners with. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.
Stay spooky.